Hey guys, Devin here with Backcountry Exposure. We're talking sleeping bags and quilts today and how they relate to your lightweight backpacking system. Now the discussion that I want to have today is going to revolve around, is it better for me to get a traditional type of mummy bag or to go with a quilt and maybe find something that is a hybrid of those two things? I've got one of each of those options to show as an example and to facilitate this discussion today. So we're going to talk about the difference between a traditional mummy bag versus a quilt, the pros and cons, and then we're going to talk about the difference between synthetic insulation, down insulation, the pros and cons of each, and why you should consider a down quilt, a down sleeping bag, or a synthetic sleeping bag or a synthetic quilt. So here I've got three different options. These are all filled with a down insulation. I don't have anything synthetic in my sleep system. That is a personal choice for me. I don't live in a wet environment, and so I don't really get too concerned about issues that you might have with down insulation getting wet. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But we're gonna set two of these bags aside, and the first thing that I want to talk about is a traditional style mummy bag and how this is going to be a specific type of option that you would want versus going with a quilt or something that is a hybrid of sorts. So if you notice the shape of this bag, it very much is contoured to the shape of the user's body. You've got a tapered foot box, and as you move up the bag, it starts to widen out through the torso, and at its widest point, you've got your shoulders. And then you've got some kind of hood that is gonna go over your head. That is gonna be basically the anatomy of a traditional style mummy-shaped sleeping bag. The benefit to a mummy bag is they're going to be very minimal in their weight and their design, and they are basically designed to keep you warm in as little compact package as possible. So a lot of times people complain about a mummy bag because it is restricting. They feel like they're wrapped up in a tight burrito, and it's not the most comfortable sleep scenario. I personally am not a huge fan of mummy style bags because for the most part I'm a side sleeper, and being a side sleeper, it's more difficult for me to get comfortable because I want to be able to move my knees in places that where it's tighter around the knees. It's harder for me to get into those positions, and so that's where a quilt has been more enjoyable for me in that situation. But for the most part, I've kind of shied away from quilts, and I've gone back to this style based off of how I noticed that I sleep a little bit colder, and I've just found that I don't really enjoy quilts as much as I thought I would. So a mummy bag, they're going to have more or less a side zip, whether it's on the left side or the right side. You're gonna have a single entry, and then it's gonna zip up the side. You're gonna have features in it like these baffle systems that are meant to block any cold air coming in, so draft points on your zipper. You'll have some kind of collar system that will pull that hood nice and tight around your face, and so it definitely can be a more restrictive, kind of a tight kind of thing, and doesn't amount to the same kind of experience that you would have in your bed at home. And I think that's why people enjoy quilts so much, because the quilt concept is just more or less taking the idea of your quilt, your comforter, on your bed at home. So I've got this quilt upside down on purpose to show you the anatomy of this. So here you see the benefit of this particular system. I've got a wide open type of application that just drapes over top of my body. So I lay down, comes up over top of me. It doesn't have any kind of hood like you have on your mummy bag system here, but I can get a longer quilt that I can just pull up over my head, get nice and cozy, and it's just a really, it's a comfortable sleeping experience. You are reliant, if you are a ground sleeper, to have a pad that is going to reflect your body heat back up into you and be captured within the insulation of your quilt. That is one of the most important things that people don't necessarily think about, is when you're using a sleeping bag like this Xped one here, you've got insulation on your back here, but the insulation properties of a down fill or a synthetic fill is it can't be compressed, because the loft that you get in your down and your synthetic insulation creates air pockets, and that hot air, that warm air, sits in those air pockets, and that's what creates the insulation and creates the warmth. So you need to have a sleeping pad that is going to provide that warmth back to you. Whatever temperature conditions you find yourself in, that is what is important about a quilt. You can get away with a higher temperature value sleeping pad that isn't going to reflect as much body heat with a sleeping bag. Not the case with a quilt. Now, in terms of using a quilt with a hammock system, hammocks are going to be used in a couple different ways. Typically, you've got some kind of underquilt underneath you that is basically like this, but it's more rectangular and it just sits underneath your hammock. There's plenty of videos if you don't understand what an underquilt is on YouTube, just search it. But you can also use a sleeping pad, and so there's different aspects, but a quilt for me is more applicable for somebody that is a hammock sleeper. I have not necessarily enjoyed being in a quilt on the ground in a tent as much as the couple times that I have laid in a hammock with the quilt over top. It's just harder to really capture all of those draft points, close them up and such, even when you've got these pad straps that you can put around to kind of keep the quilt in place and such. Quilts just they require a little bit more attention, a little bit more work to make sure that they work for you. A little bit more about the anatomy of the quilt. Well, I guess looking here at the top, you are going to typically have some kind of draw cord at the top that will allow you to cinch this tight around your shoulders, so it will cradle your shoulders really nice. And then you've got different styles of foot boxes depending on the company that you are ordering it from. And even the companies that you order from will have different options. This Perea quilt happens to have a zippered foot box that I can adjust the foot box for venting or just to use it in a lot of different versatile applications. That is one of the great pros of a quilt. But you can also get sewn foot boxes, you can do snaps, there's different types of options for a quilt. So the difference between all of these bags, specifically looking at this Sierra Designs bag, is this kind of takes the aspect of a quilt and a traditional mummy bag, feeds it into one system. So what I've got here is shape of a mummy bag, but I've also got this type of quilt that is more or less like a little comforter that there's no zipper on this bag. It allows me to tuck this quilt up over top of me, close in those draft points, and then I can cinch the hood that a quilt isn't typically going to have. So that's going to allow me to be a little bit warmer in that regard. But the other thing about this is here on the back side, which you can't see because there's this pad sleeve. But if I pull this back, this right here is a panel of no insulation. So there is just fabric here, and what this is allowing is taking the concept of my back is going to be pressed against that down. I don't need to have that down insulation here on this back panel. And so by eliminating that, I'm eliminating unnecessary weight, and I'm creating something a little bit more packable, and I'm relying on my sleeping pad to keep me warm, reflecting that body heat up again. So that is kind of the hybrid type of design that you get from this bag. One other kind of feature that Sierra Designs put specifically on their bags is you've got this like foot vent that you can pull your foot out, which in a lot of ways is going to mimic the same concept that you get with the drawstring closure of a non-sewn foot box of a quilt that I don't have as an option on this bag. So I've got a sewn foot box, but I have the ability to vent in this bag as well. So now the difference between synthetic insulation and down insulation. So synthetic obviously fits that model of what synthetic means. It is made from a non-organic material, and it comes in different forms. Typically, it is in some kind of big sheet. Like this jacket that I'm wearing, you'll notice that there are no baffles like you have here on these sleeping bags. This is a synthetic jacket. There is a sheet of synthetic insulation in between the two layers of fabric, where down insulation literally comes from geese or ducks. And so you're going to have those elements of the feather that come from geese and ducks, and those are placed into the baffles so that they are captured into a small section so it doesn't shift around and clump together. And those allow for air pockets to form and such, so that you've got the loft. It captures that warm air, and that is where you get your warmth from a down insulated or a synthetic insulated, where it'll have different thicknesses of loft to it, and it's capturing that warmth. For the most part, down is going to be a lighter, more compressible, compact type of insulation fill than synthetic is. However, synthetics are starting to get more advanced, and they are getting really exciting in that realm, because super lightweight, and they are coming out with different types of synthetics that mimic a little bit more of the down features. Synthetic insulations will allow you to get wet, and they can still provide some kind of warmth, power, insulation that once down gets wet, it clumps together and it doesn't have the ability to loft. And so it's really important that you take the time to make sure that anything that you have in your backpack that is down stays dry. So now the question of which of these systems, which of these sleeping bags or quilt is going to be the right system for you. If you are a hammock camper, or that is the route that you are looking to go, I definitely recommend getting a quilt. And I would also recommend that when you order a quilt, you get something that is wider than 50 inches. 50 inches is about the standard width that you see from a quilt. I definitely would recommend, even if you're a fairly average size, smaller guy like me, who is 5'9", 150 pounds, and whatnot. So get something wider than 50 inches. Buy the wide version of a quilt. There are a lot of different cottage companies that you can purchase a quilt from. I've got some links down in the description for you to check out different companies that you can look at for quilts. But definitely get probably the long wide. You'll be more comfortable. Yes, it is going to weigh a little bit more, but I think it's the better route to go with a quilt. If you are a ground sleeper, a quilt could still work, but I would again recommend getting the wide version so that you are able to have as much opportunity to cover yourself up when you're sleeping on the ground. Now, in terms of, is a mummy bag the right decision, or is going this route the right decision, it's really just up to you. What's your budget? What do you care about? Do you want synthetic? Do you want down? And what shape, what style is most important to you? If you're looking to save a bunch of weight and go with something really minimalist, then going this route with just traditional type of mummy bag could save you a bunch of weight. Sierra Designs has a really great mummy style bag as well that fits that mold. There are plenty of other options out there. Nemo, North Face, Marmot, it doesn't matter. Just find something that you're excited about and try it. And if it doesn't work out for you, try to sell it or return it. But there are some great options, and again, I'll put some links down for what I think are some great bags to look at for a traditional type of mummy bag or that style that is not directly a quilt that you could check out. So guys, I hope that that was useful information. We talked about the specs, the specifics, the technicalities of the anatomy of quilts and sleeping bags, the differences between them. And so hopefully that allows you to have some kind of education into understanding what's going to make most sense for you. Thanks for watching, guys. If you are not subscribed to the channel, jump down, hit that red subscribe button. Would love the support there. And hit that little bell notification to get notifications when I post new videos. Thank you for all that you do. You guys are awesome. We'll catch you on the next video. See you later.